Commander Tekva's blood ran warm down Raeth'ka's face, the copper salt taste flooding her mouth where droplets had spattered across her lips. She stood over his corpse with claws still dripping crimson, the acrid smell of violence thick in her nostrils, ozone and torn flesh, and the deeper musk of Rakhari death mixing with the mineral tang of shattered stone. Wind screamed through Ashrift Gorge, carrying dust that scraped her throat raw, while beneath her boots the ancient rock still held the day's brutal heat, radiating warmth through reinforced leather that did nothing to stop the cold spreading through her chest. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her teeth, in her fingertips, in the base of her spine where instinct coiled like something alive and hungry. Behind her, the human's breathing came steady despite the carnage, 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out, each exhale stirring the blood-matted fur along the back of her neck with warmth that made her skin prickle beneath tactical harness, soaked through with sweat and gore. The world narrowed to sensation. Tekva's amber eyes stared at nothing, his throat torn open where her claws had found the artery, the killing strike taking less than a second once she'd made her choice. Her commander, her superior, dead by her hand because he'd violated the oldest law, because the human had defeated him in single combat, and Tekva had tried to execute a surrendered opponent anyway. The strong lead, the weak follow. You never kill someone who could have ended you, but chose mercy instead. Garth had destroyed Tekva with his bare hands. She'd watched efficiency become art, watched him move through their defensive positions like water finding cracks, until her commander lay gasping with shattered ribs and ruined knees. Then he'd stopped, looked at her with eyes the color of winter storms, walked away. Tekva had pulled his knife, screamed for her to hold the human down. The human hadn't moved, just waited to die. Her claws had found Tekva's throat before thought caught up to instinct. Now 3 of her surviving squad crouched among the boulders with blades drawn and murder in their eyes, the metallic scrape of steel on leather cutting through the wind's howl as they shifted grips. Lieutenant Rachin held the center position 15 meters ahead, his black-furred body coiled with lethal intent, blade catching fading sunlight like it had been dipped in blood. To his left, Corporal Ixara's white coat remained spotless, because she'd been smart enough to stay back, while the others learned what human hands could do to Rakhari bone. Private Deccan held the right flank, scarred and silent, his muzzle twisted with cold hatred. Her squad, her people, ready to kill the human who had proven himself stronger than all of them combined. "You will step aside," Rachin said, his voice carrying command harmonics that made her ears flatten involuntarily. "The human dies here." Raeth'ka's tail lashed once, scattering droplets of Tekva's blood across stone that tasted like iron when wind blew the spray back into her mouth. Behind her, Garth shifted his weight, and she felt it through the ground, through the air itself, the way prey animals sense the predator before it strikes. Except he wasn't prey. Her squad had learned that lesson written in broken bones, scattered across 50 meters of blood-painted rock. "He defeated the commander in single combat," Raeth'ka said, and her voice came out rougher than intended, vibrating with territorial harmonics that made Rachin's pupils contract to vertical slits. "Tekva issued challenge, he lost. That's law. That's murder," Ixara snarled, her tail cracking against stone hard enough to send chips flying. "He killed 8 of us. Taku was my nestmate. I watched him break her neck." The memory rose unbidden, Taku moving fast and low, claws extended for the disemboweling strike, perfect killing form that should have opened the human from hip to sternum. The human had turned inside her reach, caught her wrist, twisted. The snap of vertebrae echoed off gorge walls. 3 seconds. The human hadn't even looked angry. "Your nestmate attacked first," Raeth'ka said quietly, tasting ash and old blood on her tongue. "She lost. That's war." "This isn't war," Rachin said, rising slowly from his crouch. "This is extermination." Tekva was following protocol. Tekva tried to execute a surrendered opponent, Raeth'ka corrected, feeling something hot and sharp twist in her chest. The human had won, he showed mercy. Tekva tried to kill him anyway. That's not strength. That's cowardice. The word hung between them like a blade. In Rakhari culture, no greater insult existed. Rishin's lips pulled back from his fangs, showing all 4 canines in threat display that made her hindbrain scream warnings. You call your commander a coward? You murdered him to save a human. That's betrayal. He stopped. His nostrils flared wide, drawing in air, analyzing scent markers. Raeth'ka watched his pupils dilate, watched his ears snap forward, watched his entire body language shift from aggressive to something else entirely. Your scent marked, Ixara said slowly, and even through the wind Raeth'ka heard the young corporal's voice crack with something between disgust and awe. Blood and salt and ancestors, you're claimed. Raeth'ka's breath caught. She raised one blood-slicked hand to her face, claws scraping her own cheek as understanding crashed through her like physical impact. The human's scent. She was covered in it. Sweat and something indefinably other, mixing with Tekva's blood and her own musk until she wore it like a second skin. Her body had known before conscious mind caught up, had been responding to it, reacting to it, cataloging every breath he took like it mattered, like he owned her. No, she breathed, but the denial came out weak, and she could taste the lie. Yes, Rishin said, blade lowering slightly, confusion warring with disgust. You've bonded. To a human. Rakhari pair-bonded with strength. Biological imperative wrapped in cultural law, instinct given ritual form. Warriors proved themselves in combat, and the defeated recognized the victor's claim through pheromone exchange, through scent marking, through deep mammalian understanding that strength was worth. Raeth'ka had rejected 3 potential mates because none triggered the chemical cascade her body required. The human had triggered it, without trying, without knowing, just by being strong enough to win and controlled enough to show mercy. Her species mated with the strongest. He'd just proven himself stronger than her entire unit. You can't bond with a human, Ixara said, genuine horror in her voice. They don't have the pheromone receptors. They can't complete the bond. Your body will try to sync with something that can't sync back and it'll kill you. I know, Raeth'ka said quietly, feeling truth settle into her bones like ice. Unbonded females who attempted to mate outside species compatibility died within 3 cycles. Bodies consuming themselves trying to establish impossible connections. Then step aside, Rishin said, and some aggression had leached from his voice, replaced by something that might have been pity. Let us end this. End him. Your body will reject the bond once he's dead. It's the only way to save you. Raeth'ka looked at her lieutenant, at the warrior she'd trained with, fought beside, bled with across 3 campaigns. She saw genuine concern in his eyes. He was offering her an out. Survival. All she had to do was move. The human's breathing hadn't changed. Still that same steady rhythm, still calm, like he'd already accepted death. No, Raeth'ka said, then you die with him, perhaps. Rishin's blade came up. Ixara and Deccan spread to flanking positions. 3 experienced warriors against 1 bonded female whose judgment had been compromised, and a human who'd already fought 8 of them to exhaustion. Raeth'ka's claws extended fully. Her tail rose, balance shifting as her body prepared for combat it probably couldn't win. Behind her, she heard Garth move, heard his boots scrape stone, felt the heat of him against her back. Stay behind me, she said without turning. No, the human said, and his voice was rough gravel, deep and resonant in a way that made her chest vibrate with sympathetic harmonics. You're wounded. Step aside. She'd forgotten. The cut across her ribs from Tekva's claws when she'd killed him, shallow gash weeping blood down her side, soaking into harness. Pain had been distant, secondary to adrenaline. Now that he'd mentioned it, it blazed hot and sharp with every breath, copper taste flooding her mouth fresh. I can fight, she growled. I know, he said. You killed your commander to save my life. I won't let you die for it. Then we die together. Or, he said quietly, we make them reconsider. He moved beside her rather than behind, and she got her first clear look at him since the killing started. Blood covered him shoulder to hip, most not his own, turning gray fatigues into something painted for ceremony. His hands were swollen, knuckles split open and weeping, bone visible through torn flesh that smelled like infection waiting to happen. His left eye had swollen nearly shut, purple bruise spreading across his cheekbone. Breathing came steady despite ribs that had to be cracked. And his eyes, those winter storm eyes, held cold calculation that made her instincts scream contradictory warnings. Dangerous, dominant, worthy. He looked at Rishin like he was solving a problem. "Your lieutenant wants to challenge me," he said conversationally. "Let him. That's suicide," Raeth'ka hissed. "You can't fight all three." "No," he agreed, and something that might have been a smile ghosted across his split lips. "But I can fight one. And if I win, will they still attack?" He'd parsed their social structure. Understood that if he defeated Rishin in single combat, the others would have to accept it or challenge individually. Honorable combat. The oldest law. He was using their culture against them. "You fight wounded," she said, tasting dust and blood and fear on her tongue. "That's not fair." "War isn't fair," he said, "but I'm still standing. That makes it fair enough." He stepped forward, away from her protection, and she felt the loss of his presence like cold wind on bare skin. Rishin watched him approach, blade steady, body coiled but uncertain. The human stopped 3 meters away, well outside blade range, and raised his ruined hands. "Single combat," he said clearly, pronunciation careful around Rakhari words. "I challenge. You accept?" Rishin looked past him to Raeth'ka, question in the tilt of his ears. She knew what he was asking. Did the human understand? That there would be no mercy, that one of them would die? "He understands," Raeth'ka said quietly. "He's human. They don't know when they're beaten." She meant it as warning. It came out like admiration. Rishin bowed his head once, formal acknowledgement, and dropped into combat stance. "I accept." Time stretched. The sun had nearly vanished behind the gorge rim, leaving them in purple twilight that turned blood black. Temperature dropped fast in the desert after sunset. She could already feel cold air settling, carrying the promise of brutal night ahead. They circled like predators disputing a kill. Rishin moved with fluid grace, weight distributed perfectly, blade held in a grip that spoke of decades of training. Fast, skilled, deadly. He'd killed 17 humans in close combat across 3 campaigns. The human looked like he was barely staying on his feet. Exhaustion dragged at his shoulders. Pain tightened muscles around his eyes. Blood loss had probably pushed him past the point where adrenaline could sustain combat effectiveness. He moved anyway. Rishin struck first, testing, blade flickering out in a pattern meant to gauge reaction time. The human turned inside it, let the blade pass a finger's breadth from his ribs, and his fist hammered into Rishin's extended elbow. Bone cracked like dry wood snapping. The lieutenant yowled and spun away, switching the blade to his other hand mid-movement. Recovering so fast the human barely got his guard up before the follow-up cut came whistling toward his throat. Steel scraped across the human's raised forearm, drawing a line of crimson that smelled like rust and fear. The human caught Rishin's wrist, twisted, drove his knee into the lieutenant's solar plexus. Rishin's breath exploded out with a sound like tearing canvas. The blade clattered on stone. The human stepped back, didn't press advantage, just waited. Rishin stared at him, gasping, one arm hanging useless, blade on the ground between them. The human gestured to it, an invitation, pick it up, keep fighting, or surrender. The lieutenant's ears flattened, his tail lashed. Then, slowly, he bowed his head and backed away from the blade. "I yield," he said, voice carrying harmonics of respect despite pain. "You fight well, human. Better than intelligence suggested." The human swayed where he stood, and Raeth'ka saw him lock his knees to keep from collapsing. His face had gone gray beneath blood and bruising. He'd reached his limit, past it. "What's your name?" Rishin asked quietly. "Garth," the human said, "Diplomatic Corps, 4th Cultural Exchange Initiative." Raeth'ka felt her world tilt sideways. Diplomatic Corps, Exchange Initiative. The human wasn't a soldier, wasn't a warrior. He was a civilian, a scholar, someone sent to build bridges. She'd watched him kill 8 warriors with his bare hands. "You fight like a soldier," Rishin said. "I was trained to survive first contact scenarios," Garth replied, and his voice carried weight of experience that made Raeth'ka's fur stand on end. "Your people have a reputation. I came prepared." "First contact," Ixara repeated slowly, emerging from cover. This war started because of failed cultural exchange. I don't know how it started, Garth said, and something dark and heavy settled behind his eyes. I was supposed to meet with your diplomatic caste 4 weeks ago. Someone shot down my transport before we made orbit. I've been running ever since. 4 weeks, Deccan said, and the scarred warrior's voice held something like respect. You survived 4 weeks alone. Garth's jaw tightened. Not alone, initially, but the crash, there were complications. Raeth'ka watched his expression close off, watched pain fresh and raw cross his features, and understood without being told that whoever had been with him didn't survive. The grief was recent, still bleeding. So you don't know why we're at war, Rishin said flatly. No, do you? The question hung like an accusation. Raeth'ka saw her squadmates exchange glances, saw uncertainty flicker. Command had told them humans were preparing invasion. That humanity's expansion represented existential threat. That they were fighting for survival. But if Garth was telling the truth, if he'd come for cultural exchange, if his transport had been destroyed before negotiations started, then who fired the first shot? And why? We were told humans attacked Ashrift colony, Ixara said slowly, her voice carrying the weight of doubt. Killed 2,000 civilians. Command showed us footage. I've never been to Ashrift colony, Garth said, and bitterness twisted his expression. My ship was destroyed in high orbit before I made planetfall. I have no proof, just my word against your intelligence briefings. Your word means nothing, Rishin said. I know, Garth agreed. But ask yourselves, if humans attacked a colony world killing thousands, why send a single unarmed diplomatic transport weeks later? What's the strategic value? It doesn't make sense. Raeth'ka felt her mind racing through implications that suddenly looked more like manipulation than strategy. Someone wanted this war. Someone had made sure it started badly enough that peaceful resolution became impossible. Tekva knew, she said quietly, ice settling in her stomach. That's why he tried to kill you. Not because you defeated him, because you might tell us things Command doesn't want us to know. All eyes turned to her. Garth's expression went carefully neutral. What are you saying? Rishin asked. Tekva received new orders this morning, Raeth'ka continued, memory supplying dismissed details. Private transmission, command frequency. He spent 2 hours interrogating Garth about diplomatic procedures, cultural exchange protocols, who authorized his mission. Then he ordered execution. No trial, no intelligence extraction, just immediate termination. And you killed him, Rishin said, understanding dawning. I killed him, Raeth'ka confirmed, tasting the truth like metal on her tongue. Because what he was doing violated every rule of honorable warfare. That's not strength. That's fear. Fear of what? Ixara asked. Garth smiled, and it was terrible and cold and knowing. Fear of truth getting out. Fear of warriors learning this war is built on lies. Fear of losing control before they've committed enough resources that retreat becomes impossible. That's treason talk, Deccan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Garth asked. Or is treason blindly following orders that get your people killed for profit? Someone's making money off this war. Someone always does. Question is, are you willing to die for their profit margins? Silence stretched. Raeth'ka watched her squad process implications, saw doubt war with training, instinct with indoctrination. Garth swayed again, and this time his knees buckled. He caught himself on one hand, knuckles splitting fresh against stone, blood running freely. The effort of remaining upright had finally exceeded his body's capacity. Raeth'ka moved without thinking, catching him before he collapsed completely, taking his weight against her shoulder. The scent of him flooded her senses, sweat and blood, and something warm and indefinably human that made her body respond in ways she couldn't control. Heat bloomed low in her belly. Pheromones flooded her system, biological imperative overriding conscious thought, demanding she protect this male who had proven his worth. He's dying, she said, voice cracking with harmonics she couldn't suppress. He needs medical attention, water, rest. He can't survive the night without help. Then let him die, Deccan said flatly, solves all our problems. Raeth'ka bared her fangs, every muscle tensing for violence her rational mind knew she couldn't win. Behind her, Garth's breathing had gone shallow, rapid, the kind that preceded shock. Fever already building from infection in his injuries. "You won't touch him," she snarled, territorial harmonics making even Rishin step back. "Raeth'ka," the lieutenant said carefully, "you're bondsick, your judgment is compromised. If we let him live, you'll try to mate with him. Your body will try to sync with his. And when it can't, you'll die. We have to kill him to save you." "I know," she said, and felt certainty crystallize in her chest. "I don't care. You should," Ixara said softly. "You have a future, rank, honor. You can't throw that away for what?" Raeth'ka cut her off, tasting rage and desperation. "For someone who fights like a demon and shows mercy like a saint. For someone who proved himself stronger than all of us and didn't slaughter us when he could have. You want to know what I'm throwing away? Everything that made me believe this war was righteous. We could capture him," Rishin said slowly, studying Garth with calculation. "Take him back to command. Let them sort this out." Raeth'ka knew what that meant. Interrogation, chemical persuasion, methods that broke minds as efficiently as Garth had broken bodies. "No," she said. "That's not your decision," Deccan said. "It is now," Garth said, voice barely a whisper but carrying authority anyway. "Because I have information your command doesn't want you to know. And if you take me back, I'll die before I can share it. But if you let me live, I'll tell you exactly who started this war, and how to end it." The words hung like a promise and threat. Rishin studied Garth with an expression Raeth'ka couldn't quite read. "You're in no condition to bargain," the lieutenant said. "No," Garth agreed, and something like a smile crossed his features. "But I'm in perfect condition to die. And if I die, that information dies with me. So ask yourself, is following orders worth more than knowing the truth?" Rishin looked at Raeth'ka, at Garth, at the bodies cooling on stone, at the wreckage of their certainty. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. "We camp here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we talk. And if your story doesn't hold together, human, I'll kill you myself." "Deal, deal," Garth said. The tension transformed, shifting from imminent violence to wary cooperation. Ixara moved to collect Tekva's body, murmuring prayers that made Raeth'ka's chest ache. Deccan gathered scattered supplies. Rishin tended his broken arm with stoic silence. Raeth'ka lowered Garth to the ground, propping him against a boulder that still held warmth from the day's heat. She pulled emergency medical supplies from her kit, coagulation foam, broad-spectrum antibiotics, field dressings that weren't designed for human physiology but would have to suffice. Her hands moved on autopilot while Garth watched her with an expression she couldn't interpret. "Thank you," he said quietly while she sprayed foam into the worst of his lacerations. "For what?" "Saving my life. Twice." "I didn't do it for mercy," Raeth'ka said, feeling heat crawl up her neck. "I did it because you earned it, because you showed us what real strength looks like." Garth was quiet, watching her work with intensity that made her fur stand on end. Then softly he asked, "What were you taught?" "That strength is dominance," she said, applying dressing to his split knuckles with care she didn't understand. "That power is the right to rule. That mercy is weakness. We're raised to believe the strong take what they want and the weak deserve what they get. And now I don't know what I believe," she admitted, voice raw. "You beat Tekva. You could have killed all of us. But you didn't. And when he tried to execute you for showing mercy, I realized everything I'd been taught was incomplete." "Not incomplete," Garth said, and pain flickered in his eyes. "Just weaponized. Your people understand strength. Mine spent centuries learning that strength without control is just violence. Together, maybe we could figure out the whole equation." Raeth'ka met his eyes, those winter storm eyes that had watched his own people die and still found room for mercy, and felt something shift in her chest. Not just the biological imperative of the bond, though that was there too, singing through her blood like fire, but something deeper, recognition. Understanding that despite every difference, they were both warriors trying to find honor in a war built on lies. "You think we can end this?" she asked. "I think we have to try," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Because if we don't, 10,000 more warriors like you will die for nothing. And at the end, everyone loses except whoever started this mess." "How do you know it can be stopped?" Garth's smile was bitter. because I know who gave the order to shoot down my transport, and I know why. Data core from my ship's black box. I grabbed it before everything burned. It has the last 30 minutes of sensor logs, including the transponder codes of the ship that fired on us. That could be faked, Raeth'ka pointed out, finishing his bandages. Could be, Garth agreed. Except the ship that destroyed my transport wasn't human, and it wasn't Rakhari, it was mercenary. Registration to Salvage Guild, Theta 7 operating out of the Free Colonies. Cold settled in Raeth'ka's stomach. The Free Colonies were neutral territory where smugglers and mercenaries sold services to whoever paid most. Someone hired mercenaries to shoot down your diplomatic transport, she said slowly. Yes, Garth confirmed. Someone with enough money to buy guild loyalty and enough influence to make sure no one investigated. Someone on the human side who wanted war badly enough to murder their own diplomats. Or someone on ours, Raeth'ka said. Or both, Garth said, could be a partnership. Keep the war going, keep profits flowing. Do you know who? Not yet, Garth admitted. The data core has transponder codes and partial communications logs, but I need decryption equipment to pull full records. Equipment command has, Raeth'ka said. Equipment both our commands have, Garth corrected. Which means we need someone we trust with authority and resources to decrypt this data and act on it. Before whoever hired those mercenaries figures out I survived and sends someone to finish the job. How would they know you survived? Because Tekva reported my capture, Garth said. Standard protocol. Your commander sent notification. Whoever gave him orders to execute me will expect confirmation. When it doesn't come, they'll investigate. Send another patrol. We have a day, maybe two. Raeth'ka stood, pacing while her mind raced through options. R'Shin was technically in command now, but he'd yielded to Garth in combat. Take Garth back to command, and they'd follow without question. Try to help him reach someone who could decrypt his evidence, and she'd be asking them to commit treason. Unless, what if we didn't go back to command? She said slowly. What if we went to someone outside the normal chain? Someone with authority but no loyalty to whoever's running this. Who did you have in mind? Fleet Admiral Kethrin, Raeth'ka said. He's old guard. Built his career on honor and tactical brilliance, not political connections. If anyone would listen to evidence of conspiracy, it's him. His flagship is 2 days from here if we can reach the communication relay at Saltfin Ridge. Will he believe you? Garth asked. You just killed your commanding officer. He'll believe the evidence, Raeth'ka said, and he'll believe R'Shin. They served together, saved each other's lives. If R'Shin vouches for this, Kethrin will investigate. Big if, yes. But it's our best option, assuming your lieutenant agrees. Which means I need to convince him this is worth risking everything for. How? Raeth'ka looked at Garth, this bloody, beaten human who should have died hours ago but refused to, who fought like a demon and spoke like a philosopher, and felt certainty crystallize. I show him what you showed me, she said. That truth is stronger than orders. That real warriors fight for what's right. And if he doesn't agree, then we go alone, she said, and probably die trying. You seem calm about the dying part. I'm Rakhari, she said, voice steady despite the fear singing through her veins. We're raised to embrace death in service to something greater than ourselves. I just get to choose what that something is now. Garth studied her for a long moment, something complex moving behind his eyes. Then, quietly, he said, I'm sorry. For what? For bonding you, he said. For triggering a biological response I can't reciprocate. For condemning you to death because your body decided I was worth dying for. You didn't condemn me, Raeth'ka said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. I chose this. You just gave me a reason to choose something worth the cost. She built a small fire from dried scrub and thermal tabs in her emergency kit, coaxing flame from nothing while her squad made camp in the ruins of their certainty. Garth slipped into unconsciousness that might have been sleep or shock, breathing evening out as antibiotics took effect. She sat beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest, feeling heat of the fire on her face and cold stone at her back and slow poison of the bond spreading through her system like sweet venom. 3 cycles, maybe 4 if she was lucky. Then her body would consume itself trying to complete a connection that couldn't exist. Worth it, some deep part whispered. Worth dying for truth instead of living for lies. Ra'Shin approached the fire, moving carefully with his bound arm. He settled opposite, studying Garth. You really going to die for him? The lieutenant asked quietly. Probably, Raeth'ka said, tasting smoke and certainty. Why? Because he's worth it, she said simply. Because he showed us what we should be. Because 3 days of truth is worth more than a lifetime of lies. Ra'Shin was quiet, staring into flames. Then, softly, he said, Tekva was my brother, nestmate. I've known him my entire life. I know, Raeth'ka said, grief tightening her throat. I'm sorry. Don't be, Ra'Shin said, raw honesty in his voice. He'd changed. Last few months. Started giving orders that didn't make tactical sense. Killing prisoners we should have interrogated. Like he was trying to make the war bigger, bloodier. I thought I was imagining it, but watching that human fight, hearing what he said. I think Tekva knew this war was wrong and couldn't figure out how to stop it. Or couldn't afford to, Raeth'ka said. If someone was paying him. Yeah, that too. They sat in silence, united by grief and doubt and terrible possibility that they'd been fighting on the wrong side. Across the fire, Garth stirred, murmuring something in his own language that sounded like a name. Pain crossed his features even in unconsciousness. He lost someone, Raeth'ka said quietly. In the crash. They always do, Ra'Shin said. War eats the ones we love first. Leaves the rest of us to carry it. Does it ever get lighter? No, the lieutenant said, but you get stronger. Learn to carry it better. That's all any of us can do. The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling into darkness where they disappeared among stars. Somewhere distant, a night bird called its lonely song. The desert breathed cold air into the gorge, carrying promise of frost by morning. Raeth'ka drew her combat blade and laid it across her knees, firelight running along the edge like liquid gold. The weapon had been her mother's, passed down through 3 generations of warriors, carried into battles that became legends. Tomorrow, she would use it to defend a human, would stand against her own people if necessary, would choose truth over tradition, conscience over command. Tomorrow, she would become a traitor. Tonight, she sat watch over the male who had earned her devotion through strength and mercy in equal measure, and waited for dawn to write their fate. Garth woke before dawn, surfacing with controlled awareness of someone accustomed to hostile environments. Raeth'ka felt him come alert, felt the shift in his breathing. How long was I out? He asked, voice rough. 6 hours, she said. The others are still sleeping. How's your arm? Hurts, he admitted. Everything hurts, but I've had worse. Liar. Okay, he conceded, and something that might have been humor flickered in his eyes. I haven't had worse, but I'm still breathing. She turned, found him sitting upright with obvious effort. Dawn light caught the angles of his face, highlighting bruising that had turned his left side purple-black, the split lip, the 1,000 small cuts that marked him. You should have died yesterday, she said, multiple times. The alternative was unacceptable, he said simply. I've already lost everyone I came here with. I'm not letting their deaths be meaningless. Even if it kills you, especially if it kills me, he said. Dead, I'm a martyr. Alive, I'm just another casualty. Martyrs change wars. That's very human, Raeth'ka observed, feeling something warm unfurl in her chest. We're terrible at knowing when we're beaten, Garth said. It's simultaneously our greatest strength and most profound stupidity. Raeth'ka felt her lips quirk despite everything. The bond was stronger this morning, the chemical pull more insistent, her body demanding she close the distance, mark him, complete the cycle her instincts insisted was half finished. She could smell him even over smoke and stone, that indefinable human smell her body had catalogued as mate-worthy. She stayed where she was, barely. Ra'Shin said you have evidence, she said, forcing focus. What kind? Data core from my transport's black box, Garth said. Last 30 minutes of sensor logs, including transponder codes of the ship that fired on us. And you need decryption equipment. Yes. Which means we need to reach someone who can help. Someone we trust. Fleet Admiral and, she said, 2 days if we move fast. Will your squad follow? Ra'Shin will, she said with certainty she couldn't quite explain. The others will follow him. They're good warriors. Loyal. But they're also smart enough to recognize when they've been used. And if they don't, then we go alone, she said, and probably die trying. You keep saying that. Because it's true, she said, meeting his eyes. The bond will kill me within 3 cycles. Your evidence might get us both executed, but at least we'll die knowing we chose truth over lies. Garth held her gaze, winter-storm eyes searching her face for something she couldn't name. Then, quietly, he said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing me," he said, "for choosing this, for being worth dying beside." Heat flooded her chest, spreading through her body like wildfire. The bond sang in her blood, demanding, insistent, biological imperative screaming at her to close the distance between them. She wanted to touch him, mark him, claim him in ways that made rational thought impossible. Instead, she stood, extended her hand. "Can you walk?" He took her hand, his skin fever-hot beneath her palm, and let her pull him upright. He swayed, caught himself, locked his knees. His grip on her hand tightened, and she felt the tremor running through him, exhaustion and pain and sheer stubborn will holding him together. "I can walk," he said. The others began stirring as dawn light strengthened. Rishin rose first, studied them with an expression Raeth'ka couldn't quite read. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. "We go to Catherine," the lieutenant said, "all of us. And we pray your evidence is worth committing treason for." "It is," Garth said. Ixara and Deccan exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them. Then Ixara bowed her head as well. "My nestmate deserves better than dying for someone's profit," she said quietly. Deccan spat into the dirt. "I don't trust humans, never have, but I trust command even less. If there's a chance this war is built on lies, I want to know." They broke camp in silence, gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. Raeth'ka helped Garth secure his makeshift bandages, checked his fever, rationed him water from her canteen that tasted like rust and old plastic, but was all they had. The walk would take 2 days, through hostile territory, while injured, while being hunted. It was the most Rakhari thing she'd ever done, and the most human, both species at their best and worst all at once. Behind them, Ashrift Gorge held the bodies of their certainty. Ahead, an uncertain future waited with teeth bared. They walked forward anyway, together. Because sometimes, strength means the will to keep moving when stopping would be easier. The courage to choose truth over comfort. The honor to stand beside someone worth dying for, even when dying seems inevitable. The sun climbed higher. The desert waited. And somewhere in the vast machinery of war, gears began turning that would either grind them to dust or shatter the machine itself. Time would tell which. But for now, for this moment, they walked toward truth with blood on their hands and hope in their hearts. And that was enough.